In the beginning of football's European expansion, Benfica was one of the best clubs in the world. Famous for being Eusébio's club, Benfica had a backbone of world-class players such as José Águas, Mário Coluna and José Augusto. The Eagles went on to win 2 consecutive European titles and remain at the same level as other giants like Real Madrid, Manchester United, Milan or Santos. But nowadays, Benfica is far away from those days. They constantly get thrashed in Europe and it's completely unrealistic to believe they'll ever win the Champions League again. They were even recently surpassed by Porto as the most successful club in Portugal when it comes to their number of trophies. So why isn't Benfica a giant anymore? What could lead to such a drastic fall from grace? In this video, we'll dive deep into Benfica's downfall. We'll analyze the key moments, decisions and external factors that led to Benfica's decline, and by the end of it, you'll realize how fragile any club's dominance really is. But first, let me give you some context. By the end of the 1950s, Benfica was already a titan in Portuguese football. With the election of President Joaquim Ferreira Bugalho in 1952 and the arrival of coach Otto Gloria in 1954, Benfica became more modernized and professional, investing in infrastructures like the original Estádio da Luz, which by 1960 could hold over 70,000 fans. As a result of that investment, Benfica was able to attract the best talent Portugal had to offer and build a super team worthy of rivaling not only Sporting but also the strongest teams in Europe. And Benfica weren't underdogs at all. They played all-out attack football, bolstered by talented players like Torres, Águas, Augusto, Coluna and Domiciano Cavém. When Bela Guttmann took over as coach, their dominance became even more apparent when the Reds won the Portuguese league with only 1 defeat and 75 goals in 26 matches. The Reds were ready to take over Europe, but their task wouldn't be easy. Following the inception of the Champions League, then called the European Champions Clubs Cup, Real Madrid held a tight grip on the trophy, winning the first 5 editions. At the time, no one could rival a team with players of the caliber of Puskás, Copa, Paco Rento and the notorious Di Stefano. So if the biggest clubs in Europe all had to bow down, how could a team from one of the smallest countries in Europe rival them, let alone beat them? Well, that question wasn't really answered in Benfica's 1961 run. Real Madrid were surprisingly eliminated in the first round by Barcelona, which generated much more interest in the competition since we would finally witness a new winner. In the end, Barcelona would go all the way to the final with a star-studded squad including the legendary Luis Suarez, Laszlo Kubala and other members of the Hungarian golden generation like Sandor Kocsis and Zoltan Cibor. Benfica had a tough task at hand and they began the match in the worst way possible, suffering an early Barcelona goal. But the Eagles didn't show any signs of slowing down and turned the match around in just 2 minutes, first with a José Águas strike and later with an own goal. Coluna would strengthen their lead in the second half, and even though Barcelona reduced the margin close to the end, it wasn't enough to spoil the Benfiquista party.
Absolutely being overwhelmed, Benfica, for the first time ever, have taken the European Cup out of Spain. They've won by...
Wait, isn't anything or anyone missing from this conversation? Well, kind of. I haven't mentioned Eusebio as a significant part of this iconic Benfica conquest because, in reality, it wasn't. Although he was already in advanced talks to move to Benfica, his transfer was similar to the current sagas that we witness nowadays, where it takes ages to reach a conclusion. In this case, Eusebio was playing in a Sporting feeder club from Mozambique, but Benfica wanted him badly, so much so that they were willing to pay him a salary. Imagine that, paying a player a salary. Well, Sporting on the other hand didn't have as much faith in his abilities and only offered him a trial with the club. Eusebio obviously shows Benfica, not only for the money, but for the faith they put in him. But just like in a Diddy party, Sporting didn't take no for an answer. They tried everything in their power to move him away from the rivals to the point that Benfica genuinely feared they would kidnap him. Either way, my point is that Benfica wasn't merely Eusebio plus 10. They won a Champions League without him, but for that brief period where you had both Águas and Eusebio up front, with Bela Guttmann at the helm, boy, they were absolutely unstoppable. Although they didn't win the league in 1962, Benfica continued playing at the highest level in Europe. In fact, that's pretty much the reason why they didn't win the league. Benfica focused all their efforts on proving their worth against the cream of the crop. and their efforts wouldn't be in vain. 1 year later, Benfica made it to the European Cup final again. This time, the Eagles would have a dream match ahead of them. After a year where Real were eliminated early on, Los Merengues now had the opportunity to face the current champs and prove they were still the undisputed kings of Europe. And just like in the previous season, Benfica had to claw their way to victory. Real got themselves a 2-goal lead. Benfica tied the match in the middle of the first half, but Puskás completed an impressive hat-trick to keep the lead for Los Merengues. Benfica from 1961 would have likely failed to impose themselves after such a staggering first half. Real were, by all parameters, the best team in the world, and they wouldn't let the final slip away that easily. But the thing was, Benfica now had Eusébio in their squad. Mario Coluna tied the match in the beginning of the second half, but it would be Eusebio who would come out as the hero in that match, scoring 2 goals from set pieces and finally ending all doubts about what was the best team in Europe. Benfica were back-to-back European champions. They were on top of the world with a relatively young squad, so the future could only get brighter and brighter, right? Well, not really. If it did, I wouldn't be sitting at my desk writing this script while I'm supposed to be paying attention to my clients. The fact of the matter is that Guttmann, the man who made Benfica truly glorious, asked for a fair raise in his wage and the board denied it. Supposedly, Guttmann got so angry that he not only left the club, but he also cursed it, saying that Benfica wouldn't be European champion in the next 100 years. Now, if you believe in curses, spirits and witches, that's the answer for you. I mean, it's shocking how Benfica has been in 8 other European finals, 3 of them with Eusebio in his prime, and they have failed to win every single one of them. But this is Throne FC, not Ghost FC, so we all know that's obviously bullshit. The real reason is far more complicated than just a fairy tale curse. First, let's start from a political point of view. During Salazar's dictatorship, football became a political tool to promote Portugal's image abroad. Benfica's European successes in the 1960s were celebrated as proof of the country's strength, but this came with strings attached. Salazar's regime prioritized centralized control, which stifled private investment in clubs and made it harder for Portuguese teams to keep pace with the financial power of Europe's larger leagues. Additionally, the regime's strict immigration policies initially kept local stars like Eusebio at Benfica, but this advantage was short-lived. As player movement became less restricted in the 1970s, clubs in wealthier countries began luring away Portugal's best talent. By then, Benfica lacked the financial resources to compete, marking the beginning of a decline that would only worsen with time. Moreover, seeing football as a business became a necessity rather than a possibility. Benfica was still relatively successful in the 1970s, but the emergence of Porto, with renewed and strong leadership in the beginning of the next decade, brought more competition to the table. Porto had a modern business plan that, similar to Benfica in the 1950s, involved improving their infrastructures to attract and keep the most exciting talent from the northern region and beyond, while also bringing undervalued foreign talent to the league. Benfica, on the other hand, failed to adapt to the evolution of football tactics and continued to rely a lot on individual talent, despite no longer having a squad of the same caliber they had in the 1960s. As you can expect, the constant failures both in Europe and nationally only served to grow the instability among the fan base. Unlike Porto, which kept the same structure and stuck to their vision, Benfica had several managerial and presidential changes throughout the 80s and 90s that only served to bring their debt to an all-time high. From 1980 until the end of the century, Benfica had 5 presidents, all with completely different visions, but all equally shit. Jorge Brito was responsible for letting 2 important players leave the club for free directly to Sporting, one of them being future back-to-back Champions League winner Paulo Sousa. His replacement Manuel Damasio tried to save everything with a Parmalat sponsorship, but that ultimately also failed. Then there was Valias Vid, the savior who promised to take Benfica out of their massive debt, but only turned the club into an even bigger joke by stealing money away from it. Oh, and it's impossible not to mention Manuel Vilarinho, who had the genius idea of getting rid of Mourinho to bring in the out-of-touch manager Tony, who will always be famous for episodes like this one.
Já disse esta frase, é que se tivesse comprado anão este ano, o Benfica já tinha crescido, pá. Só falta isto. Foi difícil. Até hoje com essa entrevista dessa merda desse gajo, mano.
Though Benfica's fortunes got better with time, the managerial instability remains a constant reminder of a golden era that will probably never return. It's fair to say that Luís Filipe Vieira was a successful president, having won 7 league titles while making Benfica a stable club once again. But his mandate will always be clouded by several corruption allegations and the fact that he's a known grifter and former Porto and Sporting member. We Costa replaced him following the allegations, but he continues to be perceived as an incompetent puppet who turned a blind eye to the shady business the Eagles were involved in during the 2010s. Furthermore, it continues to perpetuate the same problems Benfica has been living with since the end of their golden era. Rushed sales of promising talent, buying more flops than successful players, and lacking assertive leadership when things are tough. So, no. Benfica's golden era wasn't merely because of Eusebio, and its end and subsequent failures are also too complex to be attributed to Eusebio's inevitable demise as an elite footballer. Benfica fans can only blame their own leadership or lack thereof. And maybe, if they want to be that old man shaking his fist at the clouds, they could also blame the fact that Portugal is a poor country that could never keep players that could actually win a Champions League. At the end of the day, there's simply not enough rich people here to generate the crazy amount of money that a club like Real Madrid or even smaller ones like Atletico or Arsenal can. In order to stay afloat, Benfica's only option is to sell the valuable players they produce. And even if they somehow didn't need to do that, those players would probably still push for a move away from the club. I mean, this isn't career mode where you can just develop players to a 90+ rating and they stay with you no matter the club. Players are people. They have dreams and wishes, and a club, no matter how big and important it is to their supporters, can't force someone to stay against their will. Ultimately, that's why Benfica will never return to the heights they reached in the 60s. Despite not being a Benfica fan, I wish I was wrong. At the end of the day, I'm still Portuguese, so if Benfica succeeds in Europe, Portugal is also succeeding. I wish I had the answer to their problems, the ultimate fix that could transform Benfica, Porto or Sporting into elite teams in Europe, but I don't. But hey, if you do, feel free to leave your opinion in the comments and let's start the discussion. Whenever I make content about Portuguese football, I can't help but feel more invested, and I always want to know your takes about the issues I discuss. Also, don't forget to hit the like button as it massively helps promote the video, and subscribe if you want to see more analysis like this one about Portuguese football. As always, thanks for watching until the end, I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one.